Namaste. It's been an enriching day of powerful, incisive presentations. It's my pleasure to now share with you the official Understanding Hinduphobia Manual, Navigating Hinduphobia. Although Hindus have been subject to and have survived Hinduphobia for over 1,000 years, many Hindus are not accustomed to talking about it. Hinduphobia has been so normalized across societies that it can be difficult to recognize or to successfully explain it to those who don't understand how it works. This is a harmful and dangerous lie. It's hard to know how to navigate this when so many people in power actively silence and punish dissent. Hinduphobia is very real. This is why I decided to create this manual. I developed this guide to help diasporic Hindu students, parents, teachers, and professors successfully navigate the complex, troubling world of Hinduphobia in schools. Navigating Hinduphobia is a manual to help call people into the conversation about Hinduphobia. The goals include helping you refine your understanding of Hinduphobia and how it manifests and understand your rights and the limitations and biases of the law regarding religious freedom in the United States. Provide you with language to reframe and situate Hinduism within the history and language of American society and institutions so that you can more effectively unpack your experiences and articulate them to others. Address any concerns you may have about your parents or your immigration status if you speak out about Hinduphobia, and give you tools to identify, deconstruct, and navigate common Hinduphobic strategies and spaces, tools to help you take care of your well-being, and tools for when you decide to take action. I'm not going to be able to cover everything in the manual today, and I encourage you to take a look at and familiarize yourself with the website. All of the information I'm presenting today is available here. Today, we're going to take a look at the following topics. We'll start by contextualizing Hinduism within the history of religious freedom in the United States. Then we'll unpack some common strategies used to advance and normalize Hinduphobia, explore why Hinduphobia is often under-recognized and underreported, and steps moving towards addressing Hinduphobia in our lives and our institutions. We all learn in elementary or middle school that the First Amendment to the US Constitution protects our freedom of speech, press, assembly, and petition. Specifically, the amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You may also be familiar with the Establishment Clause, known colloquially as the separation of church and state. Congress shall pass no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now let's take a look at Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Did you notice that the language in the two most widely recognized documents that protect freedom of religion include the right to change one's religion or belief as an individual or as a community, but fails to recognize and protect the right of an individual or community to defend against conversion? The European settler colonists who first arrived on Turtle Island forcibly converted the indigenous people of this land. They also forcibly converted the indigenous Africans whom they enslaved. This is why and how the United States became a Christian majority nation. The forced conversion of Native Americans in the United States and all over the Americas continued long after the First Amendment was passed, including through the Indian boarding school system, which persisted past the end of the 20th century. In fact, it wasn't until 1978, after decades of advocacy work by Native American leaders, that Congress passed the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, which gave Native Americans the right to practice their traditional ceremonies, including having access to their sacred sites and giving them back their sacred objects and the right to use them. You might be saying, okay, I support Native American rights, but what does this have to do with Hindu Americans? Freedom of religion upholds the right to practice one's religion and to change one's religion. It excludes the right not to be converted and to defend against conversion. The paradigm creates a loophole that leaves vulnerable the religious freedom of non-proselytizing traditions and faiths and atheists. We see the impact of this throughout the world, including and especially for Hindus through South Asia. Here, intolerant does not refer to individual people's attitudes of inclusion or kindness, but to the theological core of the faith, which positions itself as the only acceptable path. This is central to Abrahamic religions. Therefore, the free expression of religion as protected by law includes the right to proselytize and convert. As a result, conversion and proselytizing become normalized and neutralized as part of the framework and practice of religion, papering over the historic and contemporary violence done to Indigenous communities across the globe by the two most dominant faiths, which are both intolerant. This includes the hundreds of millions of dollars sent by churches and missionaries in the West, specifically to convert Hindus in India. This definition and understanding of religion also creates the false impression that all religions or indigenous traditions that have been labeled religion, like Sanatana Dharma, are similarly intolerant and historically oppressive. Indigenous traditions of this land have been and are specifically harmed by the ways in which freedom of religion is enacted in the United States. Religion is understood and framed through the intolerant Abrahamic lens. Secularism, or separation of church and state, is a response to that framework of religion. Meanwhile, indigenous ways of knowing and being, including sacred lands and rituals, have been targeted, prohibited, and overpowered by other interests, including business interests, the fossil fuel industry, and the academy. In the years since the AIRFA was passed, the Supreme Court has inconsistently honored it, often choosing economic or other development over the rights afforded to Native Americans by the Act. Recent examples include the encroachment onto Native American sacred lands, like at Standing Rock and Mauna Kea. Even sympathetic media coverage of these events rendered the Native American argument as cultural, rather than pertaining to the indigenous knowledge tradition and its concepts of land. This same reduction happens to Hindus and Hinduism. If you'd like to learn more about this, I highly recommend reading Professor Arvind Sharma's book, Problematizing Religious Freedom. I also encourage you to take a look at the information on the website about Sanatana Dharma and indigeneity and historical Hinduphobia in the United States, which goes back to the late 18th century, long before Hindus lived in the United States. Okay, so now we've explored a little bit of the complex context within which Hinduism sits. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of Hinduphobia. One of the keys to identifying, surviving, and dealing with Hinduphobic attacks is recognizing common arguments and strategies. Here are 8 common Hinduphobic arguments and strategies that have been employed by Hinduphobic actors across institutions for centuries. Stereotyping. The danger of a stereotype about a community is not that it's a lie, but that it is often a sliver of fact that is plucked out of context. Its significance or role is then exaggerated, and it is repeated so often by people in positions of power that it comes to be understood by the general public as representative of the entire truth about that community. These stereotypes are never positive, as they erase and reduce people. Because the stereotype becomes the common understanding of the truth, when anyone articulates context or counterexample, it is interpreted as an attempt to silence the truth or mocked as out of touch with reality. I'm criticizing Hindutva, not Hinduism. This argument has little to do with any complex, authentic understanding of Hindutva, but typically uses a caricature of religious extremism that is premised on cherry-picked quotes and misrepresentations. As we have seen repeatedly throughout today's conference, this inevitably ends up being an attack on Hinduism itself and is rarely just a discussion of politics. Claiming the moral high ground. Hinduphobes often position themselves and their claims as having a claim on morality, creating a false dichotomy. Either you agree with my assessment of Hinduism or you believe in oppressing people. This argument prevents any kind of rational civil discourse and silences the testimony of Hindus by knitting together Hinduphobic claims with morality and justice. Gaslighting. There are several ways that Hindus are gaslit by Hinduphobes, including the active and vitriolic erasure of Hindu genocide, erasing Hindu history under the pretense of fighting Islamophobia, claiming that violent Hindu political extremists are posing as Hindu American students, claiming that Hindus have never experienced discrimination for being Hindus in the West, claiming that Western academia is not biased against Hinduism, amplifying specific Hindu voices to demonstrate legitimacy. This is the old "I have a Hindu friend" argument. Any Hindu who disagrees is silenced or worse, accused of being fascist or fundamentalist, and ironically, of trying to shut down free speech. Conflation. Issues related to both contemporary and historical Hinduism are falsely compared with issues related to the US and the global North. This creates a kind of moral shorthand. If you understand how white supremacy works, then you know exactly how Brahminical supremacy works and why both whiteness and Brahminism are social constructs designed for the purpose of oppressing others. The American right is the same as the Indian right. This moral shorthand makes it easy and enticing for people to latch on to the idea that Hinduism is morally corrupt without appearing discriminatory. Of course, this is nothing but a contemporary reinvention of the savior mentality that rationalized colonization. Hinduphobia is ripe with the Western savior complex. Hinduphobia doesn't exist. The argument here is that Hinduphobia is a modern invention created by political extremists to mask or even justify Islamophobia. Words like fascism, Nazi, pogrom, genocide, and ideas, Hinduism is Brahmanism, and all of the techniques I just described are repeated so frequently across every major platform that they become fact in describing Hindus and Hinduism, the song you just can't get out of your head. Repetition is one of the most pernicious mechanisms used to normalize Hinduphobia. The word cloud on the left depicts the names that have been flung at me, Dr. Parihar, and Hindu students simply for speaking out about Hinduphobia. This is such a normalized phenomenon that it has become par for the course. How has such overt Hinduphobia become so normalized? Hinduphobia is normalized by popular colonized views of Hinduism that are kept in place by powerful gatekeepers in academia, an absence in the public consciousness about the scale of Hindu trauma and persecution, even and especially among Hindus ourselves. The conventional wisdom and public consensus that is created by Western media, ignorance and active avoidance of the working definition of Hinduphobia, which we've seen play out visibly in the past year. And finally, Western universalism, the assumption and position that Western history, thinking, problems, and solutions are universally applicable in concert with the prevalence of the Western savior attitude. What stands out here is that the key to abnormalizing Hinduphobia is critical self-reflection, humility, education, and awareness. These are all commitments of the Understanding Hinduphobia initiative and today's conference. But if Hinduphobia is so pervasive, why don't Hindus report it more frequently? Why is it underreported? Well, to begin with, Hinduphobia is not officially recognized. And until we produced our working definition last year, no institutions recognized that it even exists. Lack of a formal, robust, community-endorsed definition and lack of institutional recognition make it impossible to report. 2, Hinduphobia, as outlined in the working definition, is poorly understood even by many Hindus. This is in no small part because it has been normalized through the erasure and distortion of Hindu and Indian history curriculum in Indian schools and around the world. 3, immigration dynamics. The majority of Hindus in the United States are immigrants. Immigrant Hindus may be concerned that they will antagonize someone in power who can influence their immigration status. We encourage you to consult the section on immigration concerns in the manual for more technical information on this. Avoidance and misplaced generosity. Hindu Americans often want to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially because the general American public has so little knowledge about our tradition. Rather than educating people about Hinduphobia, however, which can be uncomfortable, oftentimes you'll hear Hindu Americans dismiss Hinduphobia and say, oh, they don't know any better. People may not know or understand how they can activate the discrimination policies and grievance procedures that exist at their institutions. Fear may be a major driving factor. Fear of retaliation, often after hearing about other Hindus' negative experiences with reporting. A fear, often based on one's own or other experiences, that nothing will come of reporting it. Hindu Americans are advised not to report it by their peers. Hinduphobia is described by powerful people, like professors, to be a false claim made by political extremists. All the techniques we'd reviewed earlier, gaslighting, ad hominem attacks, stereotypes, all these techniques are used to silence, disorient, and intimidate Hindus from speaking out, and demonize those who do, to set an example of what happens when you talk about Hinduphobia. Trauma and the triggering of past trauma. A hesitation to relive the experience, especially if it was emotionally difficult. As we saw today, the scale of Hindu persecution is massive. Not only is this traumatizing to talk about, people who speak about it are accused of lying, exaggerating, or worse, inventing trauma in order to camouflage their own violence towards others. This is doubly traumatic. So what can you do? If you're ready to take action, the first step is to take care of your energy and your well-being. Experiencing or witnessing an attack on your identity, tradition, community, and ancestors has a profoundly negative impact on your system, on your prana. Practice your sadhana, get rest, take a walk in nature, listen to chanting or bhajans, do what you need to do to increase your prana, because addressing Hindu phobia will require you to call upon your highest qualities, which are easiest to access with high prana. The manual offers some suggestions for this. Document. Screenshot messages, have hard copies of syllabi, keep a log of incidences and conversations. It is good practice to send a follow-up email after a phone call confirming what was discussed so there is a written record. Make sure to document. Talk to a trusted person, a friend, mentor, a relative, for instance, about your experience. It's important to remember that you're not alone. An experience of discrimination can leave us with feelings of isolation and disorientation, which is why it's so important to reach out and talk to someone. This can also be helpful later on if you end up reporting the discrimination, as you will likely be asked if you told anyone what happened. Read the definition of Hinduphobia and unpack the incidents so that you are able to clearly articulate the ways in which it was discriminatory. It can be helpful to turn to a confidant to help you do this. Understand your rights. It's important to have a clear understanding of the protections afforded to you by your institution and by the law. Check out the Know Your Rights section of the Navigating Hinduphobia manual. Make a good faith effort to engage the person in a conversation about Hinduphobia. Note, if this is someone who has a documented history of denying Hinduphobia and refusing to engage fairly in discussion, this may be an incredibly frustrating process. Still, it's important to make the effort as a reflection of our own stance, as well as collecting evidence. Make sure to document the exchange and, if possible, have a witness, as Hinduphobes notoriously gaslight and misrepresent actions. Remember, while these issues might be obvious to us, they are not at all obvious to institutions. Sometimes administrators are surprised that this is even an issue. They've never heard of it before. What's important to remember here is that the documentation is very important. Even if you are not confident that your report will be taken seriously, your report must be recorded and kept in a file by the institution's Office of Diversity or whoever handles their Title VI violations. The more people that report, the thicker that file gets, and a thick file is hard to justify ignoring. Before I close out today's session, I want to share some other valuable resources in the Navigating Hinduphobia manual. You'll find checklists that help you quickly and thoroughly assess Hinduphobia at your institution for K-12 students, parents, teachers, for college students, and for graduate students and professors. There is a Hindu American Students' Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. Immigration FAQs from an immigration lawyer for Hindu Americans concerned with how Hinduphobia and reporting Hinduphobia might impact their immigration status. Some gentle guidelines from a therapist on how to manage the emotional strain of Hinduphobia. Information on your Title VI rights and protocols. Online security protocols to manage the trolling and harassment that we face, as we saw during the NCRI presentation earlier today. And finally, look for the turquoise button. This takes you to the Hinduphobia Tracker, a joint effort by Understanding Hinduphobia and Hindu on Campus. I know we covered a lot of information today. Rest assured, it is all available for you at manual.understandinghinduphobia.org. If you are a school administrator, educator, parent, or student, and are interested in bringing this conversation to your institution, please reach out. Our commitment is to come together in the spirit of education, peace, and community building. If you are inspired by our work here at Understanding Hinduphobia and wish to support the creation of resources such as this manual, please visit our website and click on our donation button. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May every being everywhere be happy and free. Namaste.
For the latest on our YouTube channel, click subscribe and hit the bell icon for alerts on new content. Remember to like, comment, and share our videos. For more about HSC, you can visit the social media handles listed below.